In the past 2 weeks, we did, some of the most exciting chapters. We talked about, in chapter 12, if you'll remember, we talked about the dragon, and we went through that whole thing, and we talked about the dragon, of course, is Satan, which it clearly says right there. And then we talked about, in chapter 13, we talked about the beast, and the beast from the beast from the sea, and the beast from the land. And so we talked about that as, 666 actually equals Nero, which was the name of an emperor that had reigned in the 50s and 60s. But again, Nero is the prototype for an Antichrist type figure. So anytime that you have an empire, if you will, that persecutes Christianity, then that's an Antichrist type figure. And since that's what they're dealing with in this day, that's the way it's framed, right? It's framed that way because that's what they're actually dealing with in the original context. Again, it points to Nero, but then it also points to the fact that they believed Domitian, not literally, but they believed him to basically be another type of Nero. And then again, that doesn't take away the idea that there may be, there definitely will be. There's Antichrist figures throughout, and it certainly doesn't take away the possibility of a be-all, end-all Antichrist figure at the very end. So when we talked about that, we talked about those who were marked by the beast, and we talked about that's not a literal mark. It just means those who accommodate the empire or accommodate whatever structure it is. And I actually have it in my notes further on down the road, but I'm just going to I'll go ahead and throw it out there. It would be like, for instance, if you think of Germany during World War II, right? And so you have the rise of Hitler, and there were lots of terrible things going on in Germany. And you can't tell me that every person in Germany believed that killing Jews was a good thing, or that all the things that were happening were good. But you did have a lot of people who were willing to accommodate, because if you rise up against Germany and you say, hey, you know what? You guys should stop doing all these terrible things, well, then what's going to happen? You're going to be persecuted as well. So people just kept their mouths shut, or they just went about business as though things were normal. You have people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who refused to just stand by and just watch it happen. And of course, he was actually executed. He was killed under Hitler, just like people were killed under Nero or under Domitian or under any other evil empire. So really, that's the exact same thing that we're talking about. I mean, that would be a perfect modern example, would be Germany. Some of the greatest biblical scholars have come from Germany, right? I mean, if you go to seminary and stuff, I mean, if you go to get a PhD, you have to learn German, because there's so much scholarship in German. And so it's, you have all of these Bible scholars and stuff. So they have a rich history of Christianity. I mean, Martin Luther, right? And you have this rich history of Christianity, but during World War II, the church kind of stepped back and they said, you know what, we don't want to rock the boat, because if we rock the boat, then Hitler will then go after the church. So they just kind of sat on their hands. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, not speaking truth to power, going about worshiping the empire. In that case, it would be watching all of these things happen and not doing anything because you don't want to get persecuted yourself, right? And that is not the way Christians are supposed to live. You're supposed to speak truth to power regardless. So that's what we're talking about. So again, as we've done several times throughout the book of Revelation, we're going to go back and forth between the evil empire and the beast and all those types of things, and judgment of them, and danger from them, to God's people and what that looks like and what it's going to look like in the holy kingdom and all of that. And so you get this back and forth where it's, oh, look how scary the empire is. I know you want to accommodate, but don't, because look at what it's going to be like in the end, right? And evil will be judged. And so that's where we are now. Again, we've gone through chapter 12 and chapter 13, and these very scary portrayals of Satan, which is, obviously Satan is scary, and the empire is also scary, right? But then we get to chapter 14, and we get a picture of the 144,000, those who are marked with the mark of God, right? And so again, not a literal mark. God knows his people, and people who aren't God's people are marked with the mark of the beast. So we transition from the threat of empire with the dragon and the two beasts and move back to a picture of God's people, the 144,000, those who are faithful. Again, those who are marked with the name of God versus the name of the beast. Again, not literal. So this is encouraging, right? Which path will you choose? You have here a picture of those who follow God in 1 through 5, 14, 1 through 5, while 14, 6 through 11 will picture the punishment those who accommodate and follow the beast will receive. Note that the dragon and the beast of chapter 12 and 13 are very scary, but their followers ultimately will be destroyed, which is what we get right here. Those who persevere, they will have everlasting life. And so that's the thing. Do you want to accommodate now and have a comfortable life here, or do you want to live for God and have everlasting life? And that's the choice that you're making throughout the book of Revelation. So at 14:1, then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads, right? So again, they're marked, similar idea of being marked by God, and then we talked about that early on in the study. Note again that the 144,000, remember, if you'll remember before when we saw the 144,000, they were prepared for a battle, right? And we talked about how in the Old Testament they would get together in groups of thousands and 12,000s and different groups, and that's how you would divide up, and then you would go into war. Well, we saw God's people also preparing to go to war, but again, you don't get to get your guns out and shoot at demons and devils and such. This is a spiritual battle, right? And the way that you conquer and the way that you win that spiritual battle is you stay faithful to God even until your death, right? That doesn't sound as exciting as going out and fighting with guns and such, but that is exactly what the book teaches. Notice that you have what scholars, almost universally, they'll call it a tale of two cities, right? You have Zion, right, right here, the holy city, the New Jerusalem, and then you have the opposite of Babylon / Rome / the empire that will later be called the harlot, right? The destruction of Babylon will be heralded here in 8 verses, right? So you have the two different, you have the holy city versus the harlot, okay, in Babylon. So at 14:2, and I heard a voice from heaven like the roar of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. Okay, so you look here and you think, okay, a voice that sounds like loud thunder, right? That's got to be God, right? So this is just a good interpretive strategy. You know, make sure that you look at the context around it and everything that goes on, because normally that would be God, right? That would be the voice of God. However, not in this instance. In this instance, the voice from heaven here is the 144,000 who are singing their new song. Well, how do we know that? Because if you look later at 19:6, it says, then I heard what seemed to be the voice of a great multitude, like the roar of many waters and like the sound of mighty peals of thunder, crying out, Hallelujah, for the Lord our God, the Almighty reigns, right? So it's the same, it's the song, and then the song continued later on. And so here we're talking about, thunder and the rush of many waters, right? So that is a fairly spectacular choir that you could have there, Ken, when you get to heaven. So at 14:3, and they were singing a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and before the elders. And no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. So note that the whole point of that is that you have been redeemed. In other words, it's those who are saved. Those are the people who can sing the new song. Note that the new song praises God for the victory of the Lamb. And it is reminiscent, and it is based on the song in Exodus 15, 1 through 21, celebrating God's victory over the Egyptians and the gods of Egypt, right? And so it's a similar idea, because throughout the book of Revelation, you get the Exodus language with the plagues and all of that, because again, the point being if God can help the Israelites in Egypt and get them out of Egypt, then God can help us now as we are being persecuted under the empire. I don't know what it is. When I get up here to talk, I always get stuff in my throat. It's like, it's just, one of those things. And so that's why you get all this Exodus imagery. It's to remind Christians, faithful Israel, it's to remind them of the things that God has done for Israel in the past, right? And so God can still do these things. In other words, it's not like God has stopped working for his people. So have faith in that. That faith throughout the Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, goes back most often to the Exodus event, because this is the prime example of the power of God and what he can do. Not only did he defeat the Egyptian army, but he defeated all the gods of Egypt, because again, that was what they believed. They believed that there were gods in Egypt. And so here you have God defeating Rome and the gods of Rome, right? It's the same idea. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. Note that you have this whole language of virginity and you have sexual language in the book of Revelation. Again, as is often the case in the Old Testament, this is going to have to do with idolatry. It's not literally talking about sexual immorality necessarily. Now, there are places earlier when we talked about, when we look back and we were reading the letters to the 7 churches, there's at least one example there where it may very well be, but there it's going to be talking about temple prostitution, right? And so again, it still has to do with idolatry. Now, that doesn't mean that the Bible doesn't teach against sexual immorality. It absolutely teaches in many places. It's just that's not the focus here. That's not the point. The point here is idolatry. Don't worship the pagan gods and don't worship the emperor. And so here we have that whole idea of fidelity, sexual fidelity in that whole idea. But then later again, you have the whole idea of marriage and being a faithful bride and all of that. So you have all of this marriage and couple language and all of that. Note that they have not followed the teachings of Jezebel that we read about in chapter 2? In the teachings of Jezebel and Balaam, what were those teachings? Those teachings were about, hey, it's okay to accommodate the empire. It's okay to worship in the pagan temples. I mean, it gets you out of trouble, and you can just repent later or whatever. We don't know exactly what they were, but it clearly had to do with accommodating and saying it's okay to do those things, right? It would be like if you had a group of friends and they were like, oh, I know you're a Christian, but it's okay to go get drunk in a bar, right? No, it's not. It's not. It's not okay to go get drunk in a bar. Just like it wasn't okay back then to eat food sacrificed to pagan idols or to worship the emperor. They also rejected the social and economic practices, which we really will get into later on, because we'll talk about slavery and different things as we move along, and we will associate all of that again will be associated with the empire itself. As we build up the Babylon the harlot, and we build that whole thing up, which again represents the empire, we'll find slavery involved and all of these different practices that are immoral, right? And so note that they reject the social and economic practices associated with Babylon the harlot at 17:3. And so, again, it's fidelity to God. And then that's where I would use the example. Again, using the example of Germany during World War II and all of the Germans and other people, the church itself, who were willing to go along because they just would turn a blind eye because, you know what? I can't get involved. I can't get involved because, I have my own family to take care of or whatever it is, and that's not the way to do it. If you study Dietrich Bonhoeffer, that guy was all in for Christianity. And again, he was killed because he actually, and I don't know that this was the appropriate thing, I don't know that the Bible would teach this, but he was actually involved in a plot to assassinate Hitler. But at his, even though that's probably not the best thing, at its root, his whole idea was I should stay in Germany and do what I can because I'm a Christian. And he even had the opportunity to go to the United States as things started to get bad. And I think it was Yale or one of the big universities said, well, come here and you can teach. And so we'll get you here that way. And he said, no, that would be immoral for me to leave and not stay here and fight for moral justice, right? And Christian justice or Christian morals. All right, note, those who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, those are the redeemed from mankind and represent all of mankind, right? So it's not just a specific group, like, in the Jehovah's Witnesses, they used to believe that the 144,000 were only, they were the only ones that were going to go to heaven. And then there ended up being more than 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses, so they were like, hey, you know what? That's probably not a very good, evangelistic tool. And so they changed it. It's changed now, and there's more, more get in, because, you kind of limit. And it would be hard to go and evangelize, if you cut off the 144,000, why would you evangelize? Like, well, I'd like to get in, so if you get more people, I might get kicked out, right? Obviously, that's not what the Bible teaches, because that would never happen. Wherever he goes, right? Notice that they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Where did the Lamb go? He went to his death in sacrifice, right? So following the Lamb wherever he goes means that you follow the Lamb even to your death, if that's what it takes. Note that the first fruits, where it talks about these have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. Well, what is a first fruit? It is a sacrifice, right? And so, again, be prepared to be sacrificed. And in their mouth no lie was found, for they are blameless. All right, again, talking about the 144,000. The no lie in their mouths, it could be a reference to Zephaniah 3:13, which says, those who are left in Israel, they shall do no injustice and speak no lies, nor shall there be found in their mouth a deceitful tongue, for they shall graze and lie down, and none shall make them afraid, right? And so this could be taken as an end-time prophecy of what ultimately it will be like once they have, have been sacrificed for God. Note, too, that the dragon speaks lies, right, through his followers. And the beasts, both of the beasts, again, the one beast representing the emperor himself or the idea of an emperor who persecutes, and then the second beast from the land represents the emperor cult who requires people to worship the emperor, right? The faithful speak truth, even to power, right? So whereas the empire lies to you and says, this is the way that you get safety. We can provide you with safety, right? They can't provide you with safety. Again, that was what chapter 9 was about when we talked about the Parthians. The Parthians could have defeated Rome. They defeated Rome several times. It was always a possibility on the horizon that they could. They can't provide you with safety, right? They might fall themselves, and of course, eventually they do. The only place that you can find true safety is in God. Then I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. Note that the word gospel, it is an Old English word that simply it means good news, right? And good news is used throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. Note that we always think of good news or the gospel, we think of it as the gospel of Jesus Christ, in that all of the things Jesus did for us, right? And he died on the cross, and that is absolutely part of the gospel. But when good news is used in the Old Testament, it often entails judgment as well against both Israel and Israel's enemies. So it is oftentimes referred to as good news because God's judgment is always good, right? And that's the point. Notice at Nahum 1:15, behold, upon the mountains the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace. Keep your feasts, O Judah, fulfill your vows, for never again shall the worthless pass through you. He is utterly cut off. So again, we're talking about the good news, the gospel, concerning Israel's enemies in this instance. And that good news is that they will be judged, right? Following this, of course, you will have announcements of judgment, which will vindicate the faithful, right? So at verse 7, we will have announcements of general judgments. Verse 8 will announce judgment against Babylon, i.e. Rome, i.e. the empire, i.e. any empire like that. And then verses 9 through 11 will announce judgment against the beast's worshipers, right? So you have general judgment, then against Babylon and the empire, and then against all the followers of the beast. So at 7. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water." Another angel, a second followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the great, she who made all the nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality," right? Note, this is going to be an allusion to Isaiah 21:9, "And behold, here come riders, horsemen in pairs. And he answered, Fallen, fallen is Babylon, and all the carved images of her gods he has shattered to the ground." So note that this reference back to Isaiah is talking about literal Babylon. And again, universally, the Jewish people and the Christians saw and referred to Rome as another Babylon. And again, part of that is because they both destroyed the temple. Again, remember, and this is a complicated deal, but part of that whole thing is, we may think, well, Babylon was different. That was way a long time ago, so maybe Rome, that's a different thing. Not to John it wasn't. To John, all evil is related. Again, it's not, you have a crop up of evil, and then it dies down, and then everything goes good for a while, and then suddenly a new evil crops up. And then things are good for a while. And then suddenly a new evil crops up. We might think of that as far as World War I, right? We might think of World War I and then World War II. We might think of that as two different evils. And then we think of Korea, right? And the Korean War. And then Vietnam, right? And then the Gulf War or whatever. And we think of those, clearly in our minds, we think of those as different, they're different wars, right? But not to John. To John, all evil is related. It's not, bless you, it's not different cropping up of evil here and there. It is all one big related evil, right? That just goes, and it's more visible at times than other times, but it's always here. And so that's the way John sees it. And so when we talk about Babylon as, or Rome as the new Babylon and all of those things, again, it's the same thing as far as John's concerned. They're the same thing. It's just another example of the evil that prevails over the earth. Note that when we looked back at 14:8, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. Again, the sexual immorality there, it's talking about pagan worship, right? Because that's the whole running theme throughout. Again, is there literal sexual immorality involved in that? Yes, there absolutely could be. Again, dealing with temple prostitution and things like that. But we're not just suddenly saying people are doing whatever, it's like they're these hippies or whatever. It's not that. It's talking about infidelity to God as the bride, right? And so that's the point. So then you get to 21:8. And again, fallen, fallen is Babylon, and all the carved images of her gods he has shattered to the ground. It's the same thing. It's the whole idea of the empire making you worship false gods and taking your eyes off of God. So they both have to do with idolatry. Note that the primary background may be in Jeremiah 51:7 and 8. Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand, making all the earth drunken. The nations drank of her wine, therefore the nations went mad. Suddenly Babylon has fallen and been broken. Wail for her. Take balm for her pain. Perhaps she may be healed. Right? So again, the whole idea there is that everybody finds their faith in Babylon, and then Babylon ends up destroyed, right? And God ends up destroying Babylon, and then what are you going to do now, right? So, and it's joking around at the end. It's like, oh, well, she's, here she is. She's in pain now, and, what are you going to do? I guess we could try to, call a doctor or something. I don't know. She's going to need some help. That's the point. It's a joke. I mean, it's making fun of Babylon, if you will. Even Peter uses code and refers to Rome as Babylon. She who is at Babylon, who is likewise chosen, sends you greetings, and so does Mark, my son. So note, he is in Rome, right, and talking about being in Rome, but uses code language and calls it Babylon. And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on its forehead or on his hand, again, in case you were questioning and you're saying, I don't think this has to do with emperor worship or any of that stuff, it clearly says it right there, right? If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, not literal, but again, slaves were marked on their foreheads, soldiers were marked on their hands, and so that's the point. You're a slave to the beast. The beast equals the empire. However, who does the beast work for? The beast works for the dragon. Who is the dragon? The dragon is Satan. So by giving in to the beast, you're worshiping Satan. That's the point. That's the point being made there. He also will drink the wine of God's wrath, right? So note, we have the cup of the sexual immorality, right? Well, now he's going to be drinking the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the Lamb and holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Note that those who accommodate and follow the beast may not suffer in this life, but they will be punished in the next, right? And note that the wrath is given full strength, and the point there, it's the cup of his anger. The point there is that in the ancient world, they all drank wine, and yes, it was fermented wine, and it was alcoholic. However, they did dilute it, right? And so it was usually diluted. Wine was generally diluted 6 parts water to 1 part wine. Well, here, it's not diluted at all. It's full strength wine. It would be like getting hit with a full strength of God's wine, right? So as he brings about justice. It is a standard, the cup is a standard metaphor for God's judgment. Notice in Isaiah 51:17, wake yourself, stand up, O Jerusalem, you who have drunk from the hand of the Lord the cup of his wrath, who have drunk to the dregs the bowl, the cup of staggering, right? That's not a good cup to drink from. Psalm 75:8, for in the hand of the Lord there is a cup with foaming wine, well mixed, and he pours out from it, and all the wicked of the earth shall drain it down to the dregs, right? So that's a standard image in the Old Testament. 14:11, and the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, these worshipers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. So again, those who choose not to follow God and choose to find their comfort in the empire, or in the world, if you will, note that they will be, their torment goes up forever and ever, right? So interestingly, this passage would seem to indicate that it's eternal punishment, right? So there's a debate about, is it eternal punishment, or are you eventually destroyed and then you're just destroyed, for whatever at some point in time, or is there some form of eternal punishment? And it is certainly possible, since this is all symbolic, that it is hyperbole, right? So it's just trying to scare people into, you don't want to get eternal punishment, so therefore you got to, get on board and worship God and don't worship the empire. The empire. And that's possible. However, note that the same language of forever and ever that same language is used to describe the eternality of God and Christ at 1:18, 4:10, 10:6, 11:15, and 15:7, right? Also, the reign of the saints at 22:5, and to the eternal suffering of the beast at 20:10. So if you're looking for evidence to find whether, hell is actually eternal suffering of some sorts, now exactly what that is, that's a different thing, but if it's some sort of eternal suffering, or at some point in time are they destroyed, it would seem to indicate, if you use the same language and you say, well, clearly God and Christ are eternal they're not going to disappear at some point in time. And then you assume the saints, they're eternal, and so that same language is used. And then it's referred to as eternal suffering of the beast forever and ever. Same language. So it would seem that this would be an evidence that hell is some form of eternal punishment, right? I just threw that out there for y'all. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them. Notice the promise of rest here, as well as the promises of judgment, are meant to turn John's audience away from accommodation and toward following Christ, right? So the whole point here, again, I know I said a minute ago that it's not just to scare you. In the previous couple of verses, but the overall idea is to scare you. In other words, it is to make you realize, look, if you follow the beast, you're going to be destroyed, right? And that is not a happy message. That's not something that you want, right? And all of this. All of these images are meant to convey that for you, right? So you don't want to follow the Satan, which is shown as a dragon, and certainly not the beast. And again, the word beast, it's basically the note that the first beast looks just like the dragon, right? And so that's because he gets his power from the dragon. And so it's satanic, right? The whole idea of persecution of Christianity and evil empires and stuff, it's a satanic plot against Christianity. And so it's to make you look at that and get that image in your head and say, I don't want to be a part of that, right? And that's a good decision. So make the right decision, follow God, be part of the 144,000 who are, hanging out with Jesus, right? Don't be part of the dragon and the two beasts and then the eternal punishment. That's not good. That is part of it. I mean, it's part of it is to strike fear into people who are thinking, I would be more comfortable if I accommodated the beast, by not getting persecuted on earth. And John says, well, you might be more comfortable here, but you're certainly not going to be more comfortable after the fact, right? So, that's the thing. Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and seated on the cloud, one like a son of man, with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Note that the Son of Man is actually has two different. He would have two reactions there, right? So if you follow the Son of Man, who is Christ or the Messiah, let's say it that way. Christ means Messiah, but it's the Messiah from Daniel 7, 13, and 14, right? The one who comes on the clouds. If you follow him, then this is a great message for you, right? Here he is. He's on the cloud. He's got the sickle. He's ready for, to exercise judgment and everything. But if you follow the beast, this is a terrifying image, right? So it has a dual message there. For those who follow him, it's a comforting message. Christ is here, finally, good deal. But for those who do not, it is, oh no, Christ is here, right? So it's a dual message. So then we have verses 15 through 20, and they're going to be visualized as a grain harvest in 15 through 16, and then a grape harvest in 17 through 20. Their background is going to be an allusion to Joel 3:13. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Go in, tread, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their evil is great. It's about judging evil, right? See also Jeremiah 51:33. For thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, the daughter of Babylon is like a threshing floor. At the time when it is trodden, yet a little while, and the time of her harvest will come, right? So it's the same type of language. The question that people have here is you have the grain harvest at 15 and 16, and then the grape harvest at 17 through 20. Clearly, the grape harvest at 17 through 20 is a bad thing. It's negative judgment, right? But what is meant by the grain harvest of 15 and 16? Is it also negative judgment? And it's up for debate, but it's unlikely. It seems that the grain harvest, the verses 15 and 16, seem to be the harvest of the faithful. And then you have that against the harvest of the unfaithful. And if you look at it, the grain harvest seems pretty good, right? And then it's really undescriptive or nondescriptive, you know. But the vine harvest, you do not want that, right? So at 14:15, and another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, "Put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe." So he sat on the cloud, swung his sickle across the earth, and the earth was reaped, right? So again, that's nondescriptive, right? It's not terribly scary, okay? So it could be, or it could be a precursor. It could be like a little introductory thing to what's to come afterwards. So it could both be negative. It seems normal to me to see it as the harvest of the faithful and the harvest of the evil, to again show you which one you want to be a part of. Then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle, right? So this is like, oh, another harvest, and then you're like, oh, no. And another angel came out from the altar, the angel who has authority over the fire, and he called with a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle, "Put in your sickle and gather the clusters from the vine and the earth, for its grapes are ripe." So far, so good, right? This doesn't seem too bad. Note that the fire of the incense, the fire that the angel has authority over is going to be like the fire of the incense altar. So again, it's like there's sacrifices. So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And note that a winepress, they literally pressed it generally with their feet. All right, sometimes you'd have rocks and such, but they would generally just do it with their feet. And so what you'd do is you'd hold on to some straps up above, and they would just dance around on grapes and stuff, and they would smash out the grapes. And so that's what's happening here, is that the evil, those who are being judged, are being smashed, and their blood is running out. And so it's their blood that runs out. So it's not the blood of Christians anymore. Now it's the blood of those who are unfaithful or even persecutors. "And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia." Notice it's lots of blood, right? And you get several images, and I didn't put them here, but you get several images in the Old Testament of war and in other extra biblical literature of war and horses that are up to their bridles and such in blood. And so it's just a really scary image of all the blood and stuff that will happen at judgment. Again, it's a scary image, and it's a picture, right? Meant to show you that you don't want to be involved in judgment. Note that those outside the city represent the world and those who follow the world, right? But those in the city are those who follow God in Christ, and they're protected inside the holy city at this point. It's those who do not make it to the holy city who will be trodden, and their blood will run out like grape juice, right? So that is it's a fairly horrifying image that is meant to be that way, right? It's meant to make you say, I don't want to be involved in that, right? I don't think I want to be squished like a grape. Okay, well, good. Then follow God. Don't follow the world, right? Follow God. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to leave a comment or question. And if you found this video helpful, hit like. And if you would like to be notified when new videos are released, hit subscribe and join us next time as we study the Bible in context.